This is Dr. Schroder with this week's video introduction to week number 5 in our course in professional nursing. We've come a long ways and we're getting towards the end, just a couple more weeks to go. A lot of the heavy lifting is done, and so you've got just a couple more big assignments, and we're done. And we had a good week in week number 4. Week number 4 was primarily 2 discussion questions, and the first discussion question, of course, was a discussion question on critical thinking, and a very lively debate, very lively discussion popped up around the concept of critical thinking, and such questions as what is it and how does it really relate to us in nursing. And critical thinking is one of those things that I've heard some people say when asked what is critical thinking, and it's kind of like, well, you ponder and say, well, it's one of those things that I don't know if I can explain it, but I know it when I see it. It's there are many different models for critical thinking, and it's really a very generic term. But what it boils down to, the most common way we use it is to say that it is how we approach problems. Critical thinking, particularly in a nursing sense, refers to problem solving and how do we handle and how do we solve problems. And so there's many different aspects to that. Part of it is a cognitive, knowledge-based. The more we know, the better we are to handle certain kinds of problems. If we don't have knowledge about certain things, then it's kind of hard to, problem solve. For example, if you're trying to determine what medication to give for a particular situation or a particular malady, if you don't know what those medications are, it's kind of hard to decide. But it's more than just knowledge. A lot of it also is our own intuition, those feelings that we develop about certain situations, and then trial and error and experience plays a large part of that as well. So all these things come up with the way or develop our own personal critical thinking skills and how we handle problems. The second discussion we had this week was on conflict management, which actually in many ways goes hand in hand with critical thinking, because conflicts are one of those things that our intuition drives a lot to what we do, and our lived experience drives a lot of what we do. And most of the conversation had to do with how each of us individually deals with conflict. Many of you had expressed feeling you don't like conflict. Conflict is something bad. Conflict is something that is negative, and so it's something to be avoided. And that's very common with nurses. But I would challenge you to look at conflict as something that is oftentimes necessary, and isn't necessarily a negative. It can be negative, of course, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that there aren't good things that come out of it. And particularly when we're dealing with dilemmas and trying to come up with solutions to problems. Sometimes the conflict's important. It's the conflict that actually drives what the final solutions are and drives the compromise. So although, unresolved conflict and conflict that leads to arguing or leads to hurt feelings, of course, nobody likes that. But conflict itself is not something that is necessarily in and of itself a negative or in and of itself bad. It's how we handle it is what makes it, if we were to use the terms good and bad, that's really what it comes down to, is how do we handle our conflict? How assertive are we? And those are 2 very good discussions we had this week. One last thought on critical thinking is, and I don't remember if I shared this with you last week, but one of my doctor friends at Loma Linda many years ago used to say, when somebody mentioned critical thinking, he says, yes, critical thinking. He says, good critical thinking is good. Good critical thinking comes from experience. And experience, well, that comes from bad critical thinking. The idea, of course, being that it's those we learn through things, the school of hard knocks. It's our mistakes that we make is oftentimes how we learn, and how we learn best sometimes. And remember that as you go through this program, when it seems like you're just getting all this feedback about you do this better and you can do that, do this to do this right, and all that. It's all experience. It's that experience and the feedback is what helps us to improve our thinking and improve all these skills. That's really what this program is all about. So moving on to week 5. Week 5, you get a little bit of a reprieve in the discussion question department. We really only have one discussion question, and both your discussion question and your weekly reading this week come out of the Shelley and Miller text. called the care text. And the first is we're going to talk about this environment to care and talk about what is environment to care. What do we mean about that from a Christian viewpoint? You're going to be asked to write a brief answer to 2 out of a list of 8 questions. And it would be good to, pick different questions or pick different questions as you're going through and as you're doing this. You have to find a peer-reviewed journal or study from the library for this assignment. This is one that's going to require you to go and use your library search skills to try to locate an article. So it's important. This isn't going to be a Google search. I don't want you to use Google or Yahoo or any of the usual things that you've been using for searches. You'll find very quickly in the program that those ways of finding information, although useful for a lot of things, they're going to lead you into a lot of frustration and not peer-reviewed information if you just rely on Google for information. So this is one where I want you to practice using the APU library and see those APU library helps. Going to either ProQuest or EBSCO. I think EBSCO is probably the best database to use because it includes CINAHL, which is the Cumulative Index of Nursing and Allied Health Literature. Kind of a mouthful there, but that's where you're going to find most of the nursing journals listed. And just do a search and try to find an article that will match this topic or match the topic that we're discussing in class. And you don't have to include a copy of that article. You're just going to cite that article within your discussion question. Again, working on and building those APA skills. And then, of course, in week number 5, at the end of this week, is going to be do your presentation. This is an individual presentation, and I have to say that most of the classes in the program are actually group presentations. You're going to be in nursing theory and in future groups, primarily be doing presentations as groups, you're going to be broken into groups and doing it that way. And this course, because learning how to do a presentation is fundamental and something that you need to learn how to do before you can really do it with a group, this is an individual presentation. Each of you has done your outline, or I have gone through and I've given you feedback on all your outlines, so you will find them at turnitin.com. If you have not submitted your outline yet, you need to do that, and please send me an email when you do so I know to go in and look at it. But I've given you feedback, and for the vast majority of you, you're fine. A couple of you have given you some feedback about how you might want to adapt or possibly change your presentation a little bit. That does not mean that you need to redo your outline. You don't have to redo your outline. You just want to take my feedback into consideration as you move forward with your presentation. Your presentation, and I've posted some information on how to do a presentation, a little bit of tips and tricks with Microsoft PowerPoint, and a link to help you with that. But you are going to be not doing this presentation live via video, but you will be recording your audio voice, and there are directions how to do that in that announcement that I posted. So you're going to be doing your PowerPoint slides. I've given you some tips and tricks on how to approach that assignment, and that is going to be due by Sunday this week. I will be posting a list by the end of the week, putting each of you into groups. And there's going to be a number of groups that you will be assigned to one of those groups. And the reason that you're assigned to the groups isn't because you're going to be working on this as a group project, but because I break it into groups because you're going to be required to go and listen to everybody else's presentation. And if I've got 20 of you or 21 of you doing a presentation, each one about 15 minutes or so, or 10 or 15 minutes, it's going to take a long time for you to do that. So I don't want you to do that. So you're going to be in a group where you're going to have maybe 4 presentations to review, 3 or 4 presentations, and then you'll be giving feedback on one of those presentations. So anyway, there, and the instructions for that will be in that group discussion, and you'll actually be doing those discussions in week number 6, but you'll be posting them in the group forum at the end of this week. Let me know if you have any questions about that. And then, of course, there's a weekly reflection this week also, again, focusing on Chapter 10 of the called the Care text, talking about shalom, and again, continuing a discussion of spirituality and nursing. So that's a pretty good week for you this week. On your radar screen, next week is your last week. You'll be having one more weekly video from me at the beginning of next week, and that is when your final paper is due. I have given everybody feedback on your paper, so if you go into turnitin.com, you will see my feedback. It's fairly extensive feedback for most of you. So you need to, very important, incorporate my feedback. It doesn't mean that you need to be 100% on absolutely everything, but we really expect to see that there's a improvement. If you had some areas that were a little bit weak, or where you got some, feedback on things that you want to work on, we expect to see that there will be some movement towards that. Perhaps it was paraphrasing instead of directly quoting, or consistently citing. But those are things that should get better and should improve and become even better as you move through the program. That's going to be important. So with that, I wish everybody a great week. If you have any questions, please let me know. I will be arranging office hours, and I'm going to be meeting with a few of you, I think, on Wednesday this week. If anybody would like to meet up, please post a note in the Nurses Lounge, and I'll be happy to meet with 2 or 3 of you together if you'd like. But it's good if you need some help, or if you need some encouragement, if you just need some guidance from me, let me know. I'll be available for you. So just pray with everybody. Dear Lord, be with the class this week. Continue to be with us. Continue to guide us. Continue to make it easier. And continue us to see that we're on a journey. And the journey is going well, probably better than we feel that it is right now. Be with us. Help us to keep our mind open. Help us to be good leaders and followers, and help us to see you in all that we do. And I pray this Lord, in your holy name. Amen. With that, I'll leave you to this week's work. I look forward to seeing you in the discussions forums this week. The grading on the discussion questions should be due by midweek this week. All the grading is caught up through last week, so we're through the end of week 3, I should say. And so you'll see the grading for this week posted by middle of this week. So I wish everybody Godspeed, well, and we'll see you in the discussion forums.